Hi there, everyone. My name is Ines. I come from Portugal, and today I want to show you something that I actually use myself. Okay, so I not only use this every day, as I use this, the majority of my day. This talk itself, it runs on the same system that I'm about to show you, and of course that even these slides were made by my agent as well. So if you are really honest, you don't really have an AI strategy, right? Just giving ChatGPT and Claude licenses across the organization, it's not a strategy. And one thing that is very, very important to understand is that the AI exploration era, it's over. And this happens mainly because although you can do much more things in a much shorter period of time, it's even more exponential the expectations that both your users and your customers have on your product. How frequently you ship and the way that they consume product itself. So if you are expecting AI to be a new revenue stream, you need to do more with AI and ship more AI just to stay relevant. Okay, so I don't believe that doing AI and producing it with AI, it's a new bet or a new product. It's a new paradigm of doing product. So everyone has bought the tools, but few have built systems around it. You probably, most likely, you don't have an AI problem, right? Like, I bet that everyone here in this room has at least 3, 4, 5, 10 AI tools, right? You have integration is the human layer problem. So the gap is not the access to the AI, it's the operation model that actually makes the AI useful. Just a quick intro on myself. I'm CPTO at Leadfeeder. I run R&D, and during the last 20 years, I spent bouncing between startups and corporate. And fun fact is that I didn't code professionally for the last 10 years until this year. Okay, thanks AI. So here you have the system. So these are basically 5 layers, and these 5 layers, they build on each other. Okay, this system that I have here, there is no one perfect system. Everyone have different variations of the system. I optimize my system for things that are important for me and for my organization. My first principle on building this system is that this is technology agnostic, so I can, this system, it's basically, marked on files. I can use it in Cloud Code, Codex, OpenClaw. I don't want to be, depending on one technology itself, so I optimized for this, system agnostic paradigm. The second one is to have flexibility to share with my organization and with my team. Okay, because one thing is to have an awesome system that works very well for you to be more productive. Completely different game is to make sure that this works as a system for your organization, for your team, and to actually make these things compound. So these 5 layers, it basically, you start with the context. The context makes the connections useful. The connections will enable the skills. Skills feed memory. Memory improve automations. And automations is actually what makes the context up to date as well. So this is a loop. This is not a checklist. And these only, these compound on each other, and they are all necessary in order to work. But let's start with context. This is the layer 1. And this is most likely where I see 90% of people this is where people stop. They open the ChatGPTs of the world. They type a prompt. They get like an answer that it's not that good, and they blame the model. The context is what makes the difference between AI that sounds like a LinkedIn influence and something that really sounds like you on a good day. And there's two types of context that you should have. You should have your personal context, and you should have your organizational context. Your personal context is who you are, and the shared is what your org knows. And of course that you can trickle down different teams and so on. And both are just files, okay? Both are just markdown files, and that you need to find ways to share it across the organization. We use GitHub with a repo, and but you can do things that are much simpler. You can even have an automation pointing to Notion or Confluence and maintain things there, okay? Of course, that having versioning and so on, it's better and nice, but for non-technical people that don't want to use GitHub, you can use other things as well. But here, the point is, the same model can really give you wildly different answers based on the context that you have. Okay, it's not nowadays, honestly, for 90% of your tasks, you won't need Opus or the latest model of ChatGPT. You will have the things that you need if you give the right context. So every AI tool reads from this root file. I use mainly Claude, and this is the Claude MD file. But really, when you build this system, the only thing that will change really is the root file name. Everything else stays the same, okay? And this is the beauty of this, is that you can just, your system can be portable across, any tool and any model, really. So your system, it's really, just a plain text. I don't have a cloud strategy. I have an executive OS that happens to run on cloud today. And in days that it's not working, I actually started to use Codex with the same files as well, and this is the point. So these are some examples of the actual files that I have. So on the left, I have the personal context. It has my voice, my tone, my leadership principles, and everything that is important for me. I have the stakeholder files. I have a Kevin file. And everyone to whom I have frequent one-on-ones. And what I have there is my relationship with these stakeholders. What is important for them? Important things from our one-on-ones, or even things that they say at Slack channels. So this is my record of things that are important for the stakeholders. Preparing for one-on-ones with this, it's really, life-changing. Then on the right, I have the org context, strategy docs, competitor files, customer insights, terminology guardrails. These are the files that make, vanilla AI into something that knows your business, knows who you are, and give you the right context at the right time. The context layer took me like an afternoon to set up, and you don't need to type this, okay? Just go to your preferred tool and ask it to generate those files and to interview you, so you can, he will generate these files for yourself. So this is not something that you need to, type markdown files. So the section number 2, or the second layer, is connections. So you have the brain loaded with context, but a brain without a nervous system, it's really, thinking really hard on an empty room. So we mainly use MCPs. to connect these other tools, but of course that you can use also CLIs, APIs as well make sense into certain contexts, but like more than 90% of the time, the easiest way is to really use MCPs. You have, from my perspective, from a leadership perspective, you should have MCPs on these 4 categories. Communicate, Slack, email, calendar. The build, having direct access to Linear, Figma, Notion, wherever you have your roadmap. Analyze, around Tableau, Amplitude, even Google Drive, and the monitor. Intercom, Vercel, GitHub, Gong, all the things that are important for your business. The third thing the third layer is the skills. Okay, this is where productivity really explodes. This is where it really happens. So the AI knows who I am, and the AI knows how it should talk with my tools. Now, the skills actually enable the AI to do things. And basically, the way that you should think about skills is anything that you do more than twice a month should be a skill. So basically, these are the skills that I have running in production right now. Brand slides and decks, like this deck, 100% made with a skill. The only thing that I asked it to add was the SaaSiest logo. Everything else, I just told it that I wanted to talk about these 5 layers, how I use my executive OS, and it generated completely all the content that I have here. And it even asked Gemini to generate the illustrations to add it on the slide deck itself. So, slides, PRDs, stakeholder updates, competitive battle cards, board prep, one-on-ones preparation, everything that you do frequently, this should be a skill. And again, a skill is just a markdown file that encodes that pattern and should have, you should be very clear about the input, the output, the format, tone, data, the sources as well. And it will execute every time. Then the 4th layer, and this is probably the one that I hear, that I don't hear that much, and I believe that is like one of the most important things. Of course, that they are all super important, but this is one that is one of the most important things. And this is, without memory, like every AI conversation, even with the context, it starts from 0. Okay, so you are Groundhog Day into your way through the work week. So when you think about memory, the most important thing is that you should be intentional about memory. Okay, all the tools nowadays, they have their own memory. I would start by asking your own tool how it manages memory. Just ask, Claude, Codex. Ask it how it chooses what goes into memory, just for you to have, some understanding on how it works. My setup that I have nowadays, I have on my root file that I don't want it to save the memory, and I only save memory when it asks me, based on some variables, or based on rules that I created. Okay, so there are 4 types of memory. You have the user memory, and this is what the AI knows about me that it's not on my context file. Okay, then we have probably the most important one, which is the feedback. Which is basically, when we correct or when we add something on a task, we should record what were those changes, so it records for the next time, and this is what makes the AI better and better over time. Then we have the project memory, which is basically, timelines, who owns what, and we have the reference, which is where things live. Okay, because over time, even when you are not talking about MCPs, even search, if we are thinking about co-work browser extension, it should remember over time, especially when you don't build skills, how to do something, where to go, right? So it doesn't start from scratch every time. So what I suggest here is be deliberate about your memory. The things that are important for you, and that especially the things that feel super vanilla from start, think about what I would like this thing to learn. And then set rules for the memory to be saved in order to improve those tasks or those automations. Then the final layer is automations. So honestly, this is the one that made me feel that I cloned myself. So basically, automations are basically tasks based on triggers. Okay, so for example, the simplest case would be if you use co-work. We have the schedule tasks feature, for example, or if you use Cloud Code routines, you can set a frequency, or in case of Cloud routines, you can set a trigger, and based on those triggers, things will happen. Example of schedule tasks that I have, for example, the competitive intelligence task that I have, every week it runs all the competitors from Leadfeeder, and it knows as well all the context of our strategy, what is our roadmap, and it does this research based on what is important for us. And every week, my team receives this weekly research with the things that are important for them, coded by order of threat. Another thing that we have as well is customer frustration highlights. So based on data from calls, support tickets, interactions with customers, again, I have an agent that runs all of these data points and creates a weekly report for the team with the things that are important. Market radar polls, for example, I have an agent that runs all the pricing pages of all competitors and alternatives and searches for diffs there as well. So basically, you can do anything. I have scheduled tasks as well for the important meetings that I have, and it preps my one-on-ones. For example, when I have my one-on-one with my CEO, Kevin, I have a task just for you. So it actually searches our agenda, our conversations that we had in Slack, things that are important for us, and it prepares my one-on-one before we have our meeting. You can do this basically for anything that is frequent for you, and you want to be reminded. For example, I have a daily CPTO briefing that tells me everything that is relevant for me, if there are new PRDs, new prototypes, if something that should be in a certain stage of the delivery life cycle and it's not, and creates tasks on my calendar for me to check what's happening. And if in the other day I didn't check that task, it will remind me that I forgot something in the day before. So this is basically, how my structure brain looks like. Okay. Of course, that this is a summary of it, but this is exactly how it look like. And all of these are all plain files. If you take a picture of this and you throw it into Cloud Cowork and ask it to interview you, he will create all of this. Okay, you don't need to do any fancy thing. So And of course, that in my case, I have all of this in Git, and it's versioned, and there are a portion of these skills and context that it's shared with the team as well. So the most important thing is the compound effect. Every week it gets better, okay? But this needs to be managed. The version that you see right now, this is something that is constantly changing, and you need to really maintain this. Okay, you need to spend 2-3 hours per week, especially if you are doing this for your team as well. This is not something that you can just, let it breathe. So remember 3 things. The context is the moat. Without your voice, strategy, and stakeholder context, AI is just, really a fancy autocomplete. Number 2, connect, don't copy-paste. MCPs exist, use them. Stop being the middleware for your AI. And 3, build the system, okay? Not the habit. Skills, memory, automations, they compound on each other. The system gets better even on the days that you don't use it. So you don't need an AI strategy, you need an AI operating system. So, thank you.